Chapter 1, The Paper Terror. In my line of work, numbers don't have personalities. They don't lie, they don't get emotional, and they certainly don't make mistakes. People do. As a forensic auditor and data architect, my life is governed by the reconciliation of ledgers. If column A doesn't match column B, there is a reason. Usually that reason is incompetence. Occasionally, it's malice. I live in Whispering Pines, a mid to high-end subdivision in the suburbs of North Carolina. It's the kind of place where people pay a premium for the illusion of order. The lawns are a uniform shade of emerald. The mailboxes are all the same, Tudor bronze. And the peace is enforced by a homeowners association that operates with the bureaucratic zeal of a small Soviet satellite state. I never minded the rules. I like rules. Rules are data points. What I do mind is the misapplication of those rules for the purpose of theft. The paper terror began on a Tuesday. I returned from a 3-week audit in London to find a yellow slip in my mailbox, a notification for a certified letter held at the post office. I picked it up the following morning. The envelope was thick, embossed with the official seal of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. Inside was a notice of intent to foreclose. I didn't flinch. I didn't even feel my heart rate increase. I simply sat at my mahogany desk, opened my laptop, and began a new spreadsheet titled HOA War 2024. The notice claimed I owed $12,450.22 in unpaid dues, late fees, and special assessments dating back 18 months. According to the document, signed by HOA President Marcus Vane, I had ignored multiple warnings and was now 30 days away from the association initiating a public auction of my primary asset. Narrative Beat 1, The Audit of Reality. I spent the next 4 hours in silence. I didn't call the HOA. I didn't vent on Nextdoor. I pulled my bank statements for the last 24 months. I exported the CSV files into my own software. I have a dedicated folder for home maintenance. Inside are digital scans of every check I have ever written to the Whispering Pines HOA. I found them all. January, February, March. Every single month for the exact amount of $250 cleared and processed by the HOA's bank, North State Financial. I didn't just have proof I'd paid. I had the digital fingerprints of their receipt. The $12,450.22 figure was a total fabrication. It wasn't a clerical error. A clerical error is a transposed digit. A $12,000 discrepancy is a targeted strike. I looked closer at the special assessments line item. It cited a non-compliant perimeter structure violation. I don't have a perimeter structure. I have a backyard that borders a protected wetland. I don't even have a fence. Narrative Beat 2, The Discovery of the Rot. I decided to do a little reconnaissance before making my presence known. I logged into the HOA's member portal, a clunky website built circa 2012. Usually, it just shows the pool hours and the holiday decoration guidelines. But as a data architect, I know how to look at the back end of a site. I inspected the source code and found a poorly secured directory of public filings. I started downloading the association's annual budget reports. That's when I saw the first red flag. The association had switched management companies 6 months ago. The new firm was called V Management Solutions. A quick search of the North Carolina Secretary of State's website confirmed my suspicion. The registered agent for V Management Solutions was Marcus Vane. The president of the HOA was hiring himself to manage the HOA, but it went deeper. V Management was billing the HOA $15,000 a month for legal and compliance consulting. A massive jump from the $2,000 the previous company charged. And the compliance being cited? It was almost exclusively directed at the 10 houses in the neighborhood that had the highest equity and no mortgages. Houses like mine. Narrative Beat 3, The Gray Rock Decision. I spent the evening organizing my evidence. I printed the canceled checks. I printed the Secretary of State filings. I placed them into a neat, tabbed binder. Marcus Vane was a real estate broker by trade. He knew exactly what a slander of title was. He knew that by filing a fraudulent lien, he could freeze a homeowner's ability to sell or refinance, creating enough pressure to force a settlement. Most people would panic and pay the reduced fine of $5,000 just to make the threat go away. He expected me to be most people. He expected a frantic phone call, a tearful plea, or a screaming match on his front porch. I gave him none of those. I went to the kitchen, made a cup of black coffee, and looked out at my perfectly manicured, fence-free backyard. I wasn't going to just prove I didn't owe the money. I was going to use his own greed to bridge the gap between a civil dispute and a criminal indictment. I wasn't just defending my home, I was preparing to seize his. I checked the HOA calendar. The monthly board meeting was tomorrow night at 7:00 p.m. in the community clubhouse. I set an alarm for 6:30 p.m. I picked out a charcoal gray suit and a white shirt, no tie. I wanted to look like a man who was attending a funeral, and Marcus Vane was the one in the casket. Hook, as I closed my laptop, a new notification popped up in my inbox. It was an automated alert from a property monitoring service I use. A lien had officially been recorded against my property title at the county recorder's office 4 hours ago. The war wasn't coming, it was here, and Marcus Vane had just committed his first felony under the North Carolina Notary Act. Chapter 2, The Gray Rock Meeting. The Whispering Pines clubhouse smelled of stale coffee and industrial lemon cleaner. There were roughly 20 residents in attendance, most of them retirees looking for something to complain about. At the front of the room sat the board, 3 people who looked like they were role-playing as a Tier 1 corporate executive team. In the center was Marcus Vane. He was in his late 50s, sporting a high-end golf polo and a tan that suggested he spent more time on the links than at his brokerage. To his left was a mousy woman named Brenda, the treasurer, and to his right was a man named Miller. I took a seat in the back row. I had a small, high-fidelity digital recorder in my breast pocket. In North Carolina, we are a one-party consent state. I didn't need his permission to record our conversation. Marcus opened the meeting with a breezy update on the pool's pH levels before pivoting to collections. "Now, neighbors," Marcus said, his voice dropping into a somber, practiced tone. He continued, "It's the part of the meeting we all hate. We have a few members of our community who have decided that the rules don't apply to them. They're withholding dues, and it's hurting our ability to maintain the standards of Whispering Pines. We've had to initiate formal legal action against a few accounts," Marcus stated. He didn't look at me, but I felt the eyes of a few neighbors shift. Narrative beat 1, the calculated interjection. When the floor opened for member comments, I stood up. I didn't walk to the front. I stayed exactly where I was, creating a distance that forced Marcus to squint to see me. "Elias Thorne, 402 Willow Creek Drive," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the anger he was surely expecting. "I received a notice yesterday regarding a $12,000 delinquency. I'm here to resolve it." Marcus's face transformed instantly into a mask of faux sympathy. "Ah, Elias, good to see you. Yes, it's a difficult situation. We've tried to reach out multiple times, but the non-compliant fence issue has escalated." "We can discuss a payment plan after the meeting if you'd like," Marcus added. "I don't need a payment plan, Marcus," I replied. "I need the general ledger for the last 18 months, specifically the accounts receivable records for my property. And I'd like to see the photographic evidence of the perimeter structure violation mentioned in the lien." Marcus stiffened. The neighborly mask slipped just a fraction. "The board's records are private, Elias. We provide an annual summary. As for the violation, the compliance officer noted a wooden barrier on the north side of your lot." "There is no north side barrier. My lot borders the wetlands. Building there would be a violation of the Clean Water Act. Are you suggesting I've committed a federal crime?" Narrative beat 2, the hubris multiplier. Marcus chuckled, a condescending sound that made several neighbors uncomfortable. "Let's not get dramatic. You have a fence, we have a fine, you haven't paid." "If you want to play lawyer, do it on your own time," Marcus sneered. "But as of now, the association is moving forward with the foreclosure. You have 29 days. "I have the canceled checks, Marcus," I said, holding up my binder. "Every single month for 2 years, they were all cashed by V Management Solutions. I'd like to know why those payments weren't credited to my account." The room went silent. Brenda, the treasurer, looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. She looked at Marcus, waiting for a cue. Marcus leaned forward, his knuckles white against the table. Checks can be forged, Elias, and V-Management handles hundreds of properties. If there was a glitch, we'll find it. But until then, the lien stays. This meeting is for community business, not your personal grievances, Marcus snapped. Sit down, or I'll have you removed for being out of order. Narrative beat 3, the trap is set. I didn't sit down. I didn't get loud. I simply pulled out my phone and took a photo of the three of them sitting at the table. I'm making a formal, statutory request under North Carolina General Statute Section 55A1602, I stated. As a member of this nonprofit corporation, I have a right to inspect the records. I expect a date and time for that inspection within 5 business days. If not, my attorney will be in touch. You're done, Thorne, Marcus snapped. Miller, call the meeting to an end. We're adjourned. Marcus stood up and started packing his leather briefcase. He thought he had won because he had the authority to end the conversation. He didn't realize that by refusing a statutory request in front of 20 witnesses, he had just handed me the willful misconduct charge I needed. As the room cleared, I walked toward the front. Marcus was whispering to Brenda, his face red. He saw me approaching and put his hand up. Stay away from me, Elias. I'm not discussing this further. I'm not here to discuss it, Marcus, I said softly, leaning in just enough so only he could hear. I just wanted to let you know that I've already contacted the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. I noticed your brokerage is the one listing the homes that the HOA forecloses on. That's an interesting vertical integration you've got there. Very efficient. Marcus's eyes widened. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear. It was gone in a second, replaced by a sneer. Good luck with that, he hissed. By the time they get around to reading your complaint, I'll own your house, and you'll be living in a rental. I'm going to speed up your filing tomorrow. Consider that your final warning. I nodded once, checked the stop button on my recorder, and walked out. Hook. When I got to my car, I saw a bright orange sticker on my driver's side window. A warning, unauthorized parking notice from the HOA. My car was in my own driveway. Below it, in handwriting I recognized from the lien, was a note. This is just the beginning. I smiled. He was right. It was the beginning of the end of his life as he knew it. Chapter 3, The Paper Trail. The law is a series of levers. If you know where to stand and which bar to pull, you can move mountains, or in this case, a corrupt real estate broker who thinks he's a king. The morning after the board meeting, I was at the offices of Sarah Jenkins. Sarah is what they call a shark, but that's an insult to sharks. Sharks are mindless. Sarah is surgical. She specializes in HOA litigation, which in North Carolina is basically a niche form of blood sport. I laid the binder on her glass desk. I didn't tell her how I felt. I told her what I knew. He filed a lien based on a non-existent fence, I said. He's laundering dues through a shell management company he owns. He's retaliating against me for requesting the ledger. And last night he threatened to speed up the foreclosure in front of my digital recorder, I added. Sarah flipped through the canceled checks, her manicured finger tracing the for deposit only stamps.
He's sloppy, Sarah said, her voice a low, dangerous rasp. He's been doing this for so long to people who don't fight back that he's forgotten how to hide the blood. This isn't just a billing error, Elias. This is slander of title, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. But we don't just want him to stop. You want him gone, right? Sarah asked.
I want the board dissolved, I said, and I want him to lose the one thing he actually cares about, his license.
Narrative beat 1, the Vainscaping connection. Sarah pulled up the HOA's most recent tax filing. Look at the landscaping and maintenance line. $220,000 a year for a neighborhood this size. That's double the market rate.
Who does the grass? She asked. A company called Vainscaping, I replied. I checked the LLC, it's registered to a P.O. box. The manager listed is Marcus's brother-in-law, a guy named Tommy who spends most of his time at the local dive bar, I added. Sarah leaned back, a cold smile spreading across her face.
So Marcus the president hires Marcus the manager, who then hires Marcus the landscaper, Sarah observed. He's creating a closed-loop system of embezzlement. Your $12,000 debt isn't about the money, Elias. It's about the equity. If he forecloses on a house with no mortgage, he can sell it at a distressed auction to another shell company he owns for pennies on the dollar. Then flip it for full market value. It's a $400,000 payday, Sarah finished. And he picked me because I'm single, I travel for work, and I don't socialize, I added.
He thought I wouldn't notice until the sheriff was at the door, I noted. Narrative beat 2, the phantom fence. Let's talk about this fence, Sarah said. She pulled up a satellite view of my property. You said you don't have one? She verified. Correct. The back of my property is a literal swamp. It's a federally protected wetland. If I put so much as a pressure-treated 4x4 in that mud, the EPA would have my head.
Sarah zoomed in. Wait, look at the neighbor's lot. Lot 403, that's Marcus's house, isn't it? I leaned in. Marcus lived 3 doors down.
His lot was identical to mine, but he had a massive, sprawling deck and a screened-in pool. He's got a fence, I noted. A big, expensive privacy fence that goes all the way down to the water line.
Sarah's eyes sharpened. Elias, if that fence is where I think it is, he's not just violating the HOA rules. He's encroaching on common area land. He's using HOA funds to pay for his own private landscaping, and he's billing you for the violation to cover the tracks of his own construction costs, Sarah concluded.
Narrative beat 3, the first strike. Sarah didn't start with a lawsuit. That's too loud, too slow. She started with a notice of preservation of evidence and a demand for inspection. She drafted a letter that was 3 pages of pure legal venom. It informed Marcus Vane that any deletion of emails, ledger entries, or V-management records would be treated as spoliation of evidence.
We're going to hit the front 2 first, Sarah explained. The financial front. I'm filing a motion for a temporary restraining order to freeze the HOA's ability to spend any money outside of essential utilities until a forensic audit is completed. If the judge sees even a hint of this Vane-scaping connection, he'll sign it in an hour, Sarah added. And the lien, I asked. Oh, we're going to let the lien sit for a few more days, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming. The longer it stays there, the more treble damages we can rack up for slander of title. I want Marcus to feel confident. I want him to think he's winning so he keeps talking, Sarah finished. Hook. As I left Sarah's office, I got a text from a neighbor I barely knew.
Old Man Jenkins from Lot 210 wrote, Elias, saw the orange sticker on your car. Vane is telling everyone at the clubhouse you're a sovereign citizen who refuses to pay for the community's upkeep. He continued, he's calling a vote to ban you from the common areas tonight. You might want to check your backyard. I drove home immediately. In the mud behind my house, right on the edge of the wetlands, someone had driven 3 wooden stakes into the ground. They were painted bright orange. Marcus wasn't just faking a violation anymore. He was planting evidence. Chapter 4, The Survey Trap. If Marcus Vane wanted to play with boundaries, I was happy to give him a lesson in precision. In the world of real estate, there is only one God, and his name is the licensed surveyor. I called in a favor. Old Man Jenkins, no relation to Sarah, though the coincidence was poetic, was a retired county surveyor with 40 years of experience and a pathological hatred for Marcus Vane.
Apparently, Vane had tried to adjust a property line on one of Jenkins's projects 10 years ago. Jenkins never forgot. He's a snake, Elias, Jenkins told me as he unloaded a high-tech robotic total station. It was 11:00 p.m. We were working under the cover of darkness, lit only by headlamps. Jenkins continued, he thinks because he's a broker, he knows where the lines are, but the lines don't care about his commission.
Narrative beat 1, the midnight mapping. We spent 3 hours in the humid Carolina night. Jenkins moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who knew exactly what he was looking for. He found the original iron pins, the monuments, buried deep in the soil, hidden by years of leaf litter and Vane's intentional overgrowth. As Jenkins worked the laser, I stood by with a tablet.
I was watching the digital map of our neighborhood materialize. "Look here," Jenkins whispered, pointing to the screen. "Your lot line is exactly where it should be. Those orange stakes he put in, they're 6 feet inside your property. He's literally trying to steal a strip of your land to create a buffer for himself," Jenkins explained.
But look at Vane's lot, I said, pointing to the plot 3 doors down. Jenkins chuckled. Oh, this is better than I thought. Look at the coordinates for his pool deck.
He didn't just build a fence. He extended his concrete apron 4 feet past his property line and directly into the common area A, the protected wetland buffer, Jenkins noted.
Narrative beat 2, the environmental nuclear option. The common area wasn't just HOA land. In our development, that specific strip of land was part of a conservation easement granted to the state. By building a permanent concrete structure there, Marcus hadn't just broken an HOA rule. He had violated a state environmental covenant. That's a mandatory restoration order, I noted, my mind already calculating the costs. He'll have to tear out the pool, the deck, and the fence, and the fines from the Department of Environmental Quality start at $10,000 a day.
And look at this, Jenkins added, pointing to a drainage pipe hidden under some decorative rocks on Vane's lot. He's diverting his pool runoff directly into the swamp. That's a point source discharge without a permit. That's federal ELIAs. That's the EPA, Jenkins finished. I took high-resolution photos of the pipe, the concrete encroachment, and the iron pins Jenkins had uncovered.
I had the hard data. Marcus Vane's throne was built on stolen land and illegal plumbing. Narrative beat 3, the Gray Rock Report. I didn't call the police. I didn't call the EPA. Not yet. I went home and drafted a formal correction of record to the HOA board. I attached a copy of Jenkins's certified survey. I didn't mention the pool. I didn't mention the EPA. I only mentioned the 3 orange stakes. Dear board, I wrote, a certified survey confirmed that the perimeter structure cited in your violation notice does not exist on my property, and the stakes recently placed there are a trespass. I continued, please remove the lien and the fines within 48 hours, or I will be forced to seek treble damages for slander of title. I sent it via certified mail, but I also hand-delivered a copy to Brenda, the treasurer. I caught her as she was getting her mail. Brenda, I said, my voice as cold as a morgue slab, I know Marcus is telling you that I'm the problem. But I want you to look at the second page of that survey. Look at where the common area ends. Then look at Marcus's pool. If you sign off on any more legal actions against me, you're becoming personally liable. He won't protect you when the state arrives, I finished. Brenda's hand trembled as she took the envelope. She didn't say a word. She just turned and ran back into her house. Hook, the next morning, I woke up to the sound of a diesel engine idling in my driveway. I looked out the window to see a heavy-duty tow truck backing up to my car. Marcus Vane was standing on the sidewalk, his arms crossed, a smug grin on his face. He was holding a clipboard. He wasn't waiting for the 48 hours. He was escalating. Chapter 5, The Counter-Strike. Marcus Vane made the classic mistake of a bully. He mistook my patience for a lack of options. When I stepped onto my porch, the tow truck driver was already hooking the chains to my Audi. Marcus was standing there looking like he'd won the lottery. Morning, Elias, he called out, his voice dripping with faux cheer. Told you this was just the beginning. This vehicle is being impounded for multiple unpaid daily compliance fines. Total outstanding, $4,200, plus the tow fee, of course, Marcus announced. I didn't run, I didn't shout, I didn't even walk faster. I pulled out my phone and hit record. Marcus, I said, standing 10 feet away. This car is on private property. It is not in a common area. You have no legal authority to tow a vehicle from a private driveway without a court order, regardless of HOA fines. I'm giving you one chance to tell him to drop the car, I stated. Marcus laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. I'm the president of this association, Thorne. I am the authority, and per the new emergency enforcement bylaws we passed in an executive session last night. We have the right to seize assets to satisfy delinquent accounts. Take it away, boys, Marcus shouted. Narrative beat 1, the auto theft protocol.
The driver, a thick-necked guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, hesitated. He looked at me, then at Marcus. Is he the owner of the drive? The driver asked.
I'm the president of the HOA, Marcus yelled. I authorized the tow. Do your job. The driver shrugged and pulled the lever. The car tilted back. I didn't argue with the driver. I called 911. I'd like to report a motor vehicle theft in progress, I told the dispatcher. My voice was calm, clinical. The suspect is Marcus Vane. He is currently directing a tow truck to remove my vehicle from my private driveway at 402 Willow Creek Drive, I explained to the dispatcher. The dispatcher asked for confirmation, and I replied, Yes, I am on the scene. No, there is no repossession order. It is a private dispute being handled via illegal seizure. Marcus's grin faltered. You're calling the cops for a tow. You're making a fool of yourself, Elias. I'm not calling the cops for a tow, Marcus, I said, never taking my eyes off him. I'm reporting a felony auto theft, and since the value of that car is over $40,000, it's grand theft auto. The driver is an accomplice. I hope his insurance covers criminal acts, I said.
The tow driver stopped instantly. Whoa, felony, you said this was a standard HOA repo, man, he muttered to his partner. Drop the car.
Narrative beat 2, the injunction of harassment. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 cruisers. By then, the car was back on the ground. Marcus was frantically showing the officer his emergency bylaws on his clipboard. The officer, a veteran sergeant named Miller, looked at the clipboard, then at me, then at the car.
Mr. Vane, the sergeant said, handing the clipboard back, I don't care what your HOA says. You can't tow a man's car off his own dirt without a signed order from a judge.
This is civil at best, but the second you hooked those chains, it became a criminal trespass, the sergeant continued. I have a lien, Marcus shouted, his face turning a dark shade of plum.
I have the right to protect the association's interests, Marcus argued. You have the right to go to court, the sergeant replied. Mr. Thorne, do you want to press charges? Sergeant Miller asked.
I looked at Marcus. He was sweating now. The neighbors were all on their porches, watching the president of their HOA get dressed down by the police. Not for the theft, I said. Not yet, but I would like a case number for the report. I'm filing for a permanent restraining order for harassment this afternoon, and I'll need the record. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. Narrative beat 3, the tangent of truth. As the police were finishing their report, Marcus's wife, Cynthia, came running down the street.
She was currently having a complete meltdown. Marcus, what is happening? Cynthia shrieked. The bank just called. They said there's a legal hold on the Vane scaping account.
I couldn't pay the caterer for the gala, Cynthia yelled. The sergeant's ears perked up. My ears perked up. Marcus turned even paler. Cynthia, shut up, Marcus hissed. Not now.
Don't tell me to shut up, Cynthia yelled. You told me the Thorne money was going to cover the overage from the pool renovation. You said it was handled.
The silence that followed was heavy. The sergeant looked at Marcus, then at me, his eyes narrowing. Pool renovation, the Thorne money, the sergeant asked.
I smiled. It was the gray rock smile. It seems, Sergeant, I said, that Mrs. Vane just provided the probable cause for the embezzlement investigation I was telling you about. Marcus, you might want to call your lawyer. Sarah Jenkins just served your brokerage with a slander of title suit. The legal hold she mentioned, that's the temporary restraining order. Hook Marcus didn't say anything. He just turned and walked toward his house. But as he reached his front door, he stopped. He looked back at me and his voice was shaking. You think you've won, Elias? Marcus called out. You just ruined my wife's reputation. You don't know what I'm capable of when I have nothing left to lose. I didn't respond. I just went inside and called Sarah. He's cracked, I told her. And he just admitted to using my debt to pay for his pool in front of a police sergeant. Chapter 6, The Dead End. In any forensic investigation, you eventually hit the privacy wall. This is the point where the paper trail goes cold because the documents are locked in a vault, either literal or digital. That requires a key you don't possess. For the Whispering Pines HOA, that vault was North State Financial, and the person holding the key was Brenda, the terrified treasurer. Following the confrontation in my driveway, I expected Brenda to crack. I had given her the survey. I had shown her the liability, but Marcus Vane knew how to manage his assets, and he treated Brenda like a human insurance policy. Narrative beat one, the ironclad silence. I tried to meet Brenda at the local park 3 days after the tow truck incident. I didn't want to ambush her at home. I wanted a neutral ground. But when she saw me approaching the bench, she didn't just walk away. She looked physically ill.
"Elias, stay away from me," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the parking lot where a black SUV was idling. "Marcus showed me the hold harmless agreement I signed when I joined the board. He said if I talk to you, or if the HOA gets sued because of something I did, the association won't cover my legal fees. He said I'll lose my house to pay for the audit," Brenda said, before practically sprinting to her car.
It was a brilliant lie. Under the North Carolina Nonprofit Corporation Act, a director is generally protected unless they commit willful or wanton misconduct. By convincing Brenda that talking to me was the misconduct, Marcus had effectively gagged the only person with the password to the ledger. "He's gaslighting you, Brenda," I said, keeping my voice level. "The audit is what proves you didn't know. If you don't talk, you're an accomplice."
"He has the bank logs, Elias. He's already cleaned them," she said, before practically sprinting to her car. Narrative beat 2, the judicial setback.
I returned to Sarah's office to find her looking uncharacteristically frustrated. The temporary restraining order, TRO, we had placed on the Vane scaping accounts was being challenged.
Vane hired a firm out of Charlotte, Sarah said, tossing a motion onto her desk. Big-ticket litigators. They're arguing that Vane Scaping is a separate legal entity with ongoing contracts and that freezing their accounts constitutes irreparable harm to a third party. The judge gave them a stay. The accounts are unfrozen as of 2 hours ago, Sarah added. This was the dead end. The money was moving.
Marcus was likely shifting the embezzled funds from the Vane Scaping LLC into offshore accounts or untraceable assets. My checks were the material violation, but without the bank logs showing where that specific $12,000 went, it was my word against his glitchy software. Narrative beat 3, the pivot to the bottom up. "We can't get the records from the top down," I noted, staring at the neighborhood map. "The bank won't move without a subpoena, and the judge won't sign a subpoena without probable cause of a crime. We're in a circular logic trap." I spent that night in my home office, not looking at my own files, but at the Whispering Pines CC and RS, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. If the board wouldn't give me the data, I would have to create a new dataset. I realized Marcus's fatal flaw. He treated the HOA like a private company. But it wasn't. It was a mandatory membership nonprofit. And in North Carolina, the members, the homeowners, hold the ultimate root access to the corporation. I pulled up NCGS Section 55A702. It was a beautiful, dusty piece of legislation. It stated that if 10% or more of the members of a nonprofit corporation sign a written demand for a special meeting, for a specific purpose, the board must call that meeting within 30 days. I checked our neighborhood roster, 150 homes. I needed 15 signatures to trigger a special meeting. I needed 76 signatures to dissolve the current board. Hook, I looked out the window. The black SUV that had been at the park was now parked at the end of my cul-de-sac. Marcus wasn't just watching me anymore, he was patrolling. But he was looking for a man who was going to sue him. He wasn't prepared for a man who was going to organize a coup. Chapter 7, the Statutory Lever. In the cold justice philosophy, you never attack when the enemy is looking. You wait for them to commit to a direction, then you change the gravity of the room. Marcus Vane spent the week following the TRO stay feeling invincible. He issued 3 more fines to my property for unauthorized landscaping, referring to the survey stakes Jenkins had placed. He also sent a neighborhood-wide email warning residents about a disgruntled and litigious individual who was threatening the stability of their property values. Narrative beat 1, the audit package. I spent 48 hours preparing what I called the truth packet. It wasn't a rant. It was a 5-page dossier of cold, hard data. Page 1 was a copy of the Secretary of State filing for Vainscaping, LLC. Page 2 was a side-by-side comparison of our neighborhood's $220,000 landscaping budget versus the $90,000 budget of the nearly identical subdivision 2 miles away. Page 3 was a copy of the EPA map showing Marcus's pool encroaching on the protected wetlands. And page 4 was the kicker, a simple chart showing that over the last 2 years, the HOA dues had increased by 40%, while the reserve fund had actually decreased by $100,000. Where did the money go? Was the only question I wrote on the cover. Narrative beat 2, the cease and desist trap. On Thursday afternoon, a process server knocked on my door. Marcus had filed a cease and desist against me for harassment of board members and slander of the association. I accepted the papers with a nod. "This is perfect," I told Sarah on the phone. "By filing this, he's officially on the record claiming that any communication from me to the board is harassment." He just handed me the legal justification for why I have to go directly to the members for a special meeting. "He's exhausted my internal remedies for me," I explained. "Under the law, you usually have to try to resolve things with the board first. Marcus had just legally barred me from doing so. The statutory lever was now fully greased. Narrative beat 3, the secret committee. I didn't go door to door in the daylight. I invited 5 specific neighbors to my house at 8:00 p.m. I chose them using the same data-driven approach I use for corporate audits. I invited a retired IRS agent, a civil engineer, 2 stay-at-home moms who ran the neighborhood watch group, and a young lawyer who worked in the DA's office. I sat them in my living room and laid out the truth packets. "I'm not asking you to take my side in a fight with Marcus," I told them. "I'm asking you to look at these numbers as homeowners. We are being liquidated from the inside out. Marcus is using our equity to pay for his pool, his legal fees, and his brother-in-law's bar tabs. If we don't act now, the reserve fund will be empty by Christmas, and the HOA will hit us all with a $5,000 emergency assessment to cover the gap."
The retired IRS agent, a man named Henderson, looked at the Vainscaping filing for 30 seconds before his face turned a stony white. "This isn't just a conflict of interest," Henderson said. "This is a classic self-dealing fraud. Elias, what do you need?"
"I need 15 signatures for the special meeting demand," I said, "and I need 76 for the vote to dissolve the board and appoint an interim receiver. I have the documents ready. I just need you to help me carry the message." Hook, Henderson stood up and signed the demand letter immediately. The others followed. As they were leaving, the young lawyer from the DA's office pulled me aside.
"Elias, just so you know, Marcus is at the clubhouse right now. He's trying to pass a security amendment that would allow the HOA to install license plate readers at the entrance. He says it's for safety, but the contract is with a company owned by one of his brokerage partners," the lawyer added. I smiled. Marcus was still trying to eat. He didn't realize the table was about to be flipped.
Chapter 8, the signature campaign. The key to a successful coup isn't speed, it's information asymmetry. You want the target to believe they are in total control right up until the moment the locks are changed. For 3 days, Whispering Pines was a ghost town during the day and a hive of activity after 7:00 p.m. My secret committee moved through the neighborhood like a professional sales team. We didn't use the front doors. We moved through backyards, talked over fences, and met in garages. Narrative beat 1, the door-to-door reality. I took the West Quadrant, the houses closest to Marcus's property. These were the people who saw his new pool every day and had been told it was paid for by family inheritance. I knocked on the door of Mrs. Gable, an 80-year-old widow who had lived in the neighborhood since the first brick was laid. Marcus had recently fined her $500 because her mailbox had a slight tilt. "Mrs. Gable," I said, showing her the Vainscaping audit. "Marcus didn't fine you because of your mailbox. He fined you because his pool contractor's bill was due and the HOA account was $10,000 short. He's used your fixed income to pay for his granite countertops," I added. She didn't cry. She got angry. She signed the petition with a hand that didn't shake once. By the end of the second night, we didn't just have 15 signatures. We had 42. Narrative beat 2, the confrontation at the gate. Marcus finally realized something was wrong on Saturday morning. He noticed the lack of compliance calls. He noticed the neighbors weren't waving at his black SUV. He caught me at the neighborhood entrance as I was returning from a meeting with Sarah. He pulled his SUV across the road, blocking my path. "I know what you're doing, Thorne," he snarled, leaning out his window. "I've heard the rumors. You're harassing my neighbors, spreading lies about the board." "I've already contacted our association attorney. We're filing for an emergency injunction to stop your illegal petition from being recognized," Marcus finished. I stayed in my car. I didn't roll down the window more than 2 inches. "It's not an illegal petition, Marcus. It's a statutory demand under NCGS Section 55A702. You've been served with the cease and desist you sent me, so I'm following your rules. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the corporation," I said. "You're finished," Marcus screamed, pounding his steering wheel. "I'll have you evicted. I'll buy your house at the auction myself and turn it into a rental for the most disruptive tenants I can find." I just pointed to my dash cam. "Thank you for that, Marcus. My lawyer will appreciate the evidence of intentional infliction of emotional distress for the countersuit. Now move your car or I'll call the police for false imprisonment again. You're blocking a public road," I said. Narrative beat 3, the 15% threshold. By Sunday evening, we hit the critical mass. 82 signatures, more than 50% of the neighborhood. We didn't just have enough to call a meeting. We had enough to win a vote of no confidence and dissolve the entire board in a single night.
I met Henderson and the rest of the committee at my house. We sat around the kitchen island, the stacks of signed petitions between us. "We have the numbers," Henderson said.
"But Marcus will try to disqualify signatures. He'll say people were coerced or that the signatures don't match the deeds," Henderson added. "Let him try," I said. "Sarah is filing the affidavit of authenticity tomorrow morning with the county clerk. And we're not sending the demand to Marcus. We're sending it to the association's registered agent. They are a third-party law firm that has to follow the law or lose their license. They won't risk their firm to protect a neighborhood bully," I explained. Hook. As we were celebrating, a loud thud hit my front door. I ran to the porch. There was no one there, but a brick had been thrown through my sidelight window. Wrapped around the brick was a piece of paper with a single word written in red marker: "Quiet." I didn't call the police. I picked up the brick, placed it in a plastic bag for evidence, and went back to the kitchen. "It's time," I said to the committee. "Phase 3 begins tomorrow." Chapter 9, the special meeting. The Whispering Pines clubhouse had never seen a turnout like this. Usually, board meetings were attended by a dozen people and a few sleeping dogs. Tonight, the room was packed to the point of a fire code violation. Over 100 residents were present, filling the seats and lining the walls. At the front of the room, Marcus Vane sat behind the long table, flanked by Miller and a new face. A sharp-featured man in a $3,000 suit who was clearly the association's hired gun attorney. Brenda was nowhere to be seen. The air was thick with the kind of tension that precedes a lightning strike. Narrative beat 1, the attempted block. Marcus pounded his gavel with an intensity that suggested he was trying to break the table. "This meeting is out of order," Marcus shouted over the low roar of the crowd. "The petition, submitted by Mr. Thorne, has been reviewed by counsel and found to be riddled with procedural errors. As such, this is not a special meeting. This is an informal gathering, and no votes will be taken. We will proceed with the standard agenda, starting with the report on the new security cameras," Marcus continued.
The high-priced attorney stood up, adjusting his tie. "My name is Sterling, and I represent the Whispering Pines HOA. Under the bylaws, the board has the sole discretion to verify signatures. We have determined that over 30% of the signatures provided are invalid due to," Sterling started. "Actually, Mr. Sterling," a voice cut through the room.
Sarah Jenkins walked down the center aisle. She wasn't alone. Behind her were 2 men in dark suits carrying briefcases. My name is Sarah Jenkins, counsel for the petitioners, she said. And this is Mr. Robert Vance, a court-appointed special master. Since the board failed to respond to a valid statutory demand, we filed an emergency petition with the Superior Court this afternoon. The judge agreed that the board's refusal was a bad faith attempt to subvert the members' rights, Sarah added. Sarah handed a blue-backed document to Sterling. Mr. Vance is now the presiding officer of this meeting. Marcus Vane, you are no longer in control of the floor. Please step away from the gavel, Sarah stated.
Narrative beat 2, the audit reveal. Marcus looked like he was about to have a stroke. He looked at Sterling, but Sterling was busy reading the court order, his face turning a distinct shade of gray.
The special master took the center seat. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. This meeting is now called to order under the authority of the North Carolina Superior Court. The first item on the agenda is the presentation of the forensic audit findings, Robert Vance announced. Henderson, the retired IRS agent, stood up. He had a projector set up.
For the last 4 days, we have had access to the HOA's digital bank records, obtained via the special master's order, Henderson began. The screen behind him flared to life. It was a chart of Vane-scaping payments. Over the last 18 months, Marcus Vane has authorized $184,000 in payments to Vane-scaping LLC, Henderson continued. Of that, we have verified that only $42,000 was spent on actual landscaping. The remaining $142,000 was transferred through a series of shell accounts. We traced $60,000 of it directly to the construction of the pool and deck at 403 Willow Creek Drive, Marcus Vane's residence, Henderson concluded.
A collective gasp went through the room, then the shouting started. He stole our roof money, someone yelled. Thief, another screamed. Narrative beat 3, the nuclear option.
The special master pounded the gavel. Silence, he commanded. We will now proceed to the vote. The motion before the membership is the immediate dissolution of the current board of directors and the appointment of an interim receiver, Robert Vance announced.
Marcus stood up, his face twisted in rage. This is a kangaroo court. You can't do this. I built this neighborhood. I've protected your values. You foreclosed on my house for dues I paid, Marcus, I said, standing up from my seat. I didn't yell. You used the law as a weapon to cover your own theft, but the law doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the truth.
The vote is called, the special master said. All those in favor of dissolution, please raise your hands. It wasn't even close. Every hand in the room went up. Even Miller, sitting next to Marcus, slowly raised his hand, looking at the floor in shame. The motion passes, the special master announced. Marcus Vane, you are hereby removed from the board. You are ordered to surrender all association property, records, and keys to the receiver immediately. Furthermore, a copy of this audit will be delivered to the district attorney's office at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, Robert Vance finished. Hook. As the room erupted in cheers, Marcus didn't move.
He just stared at me, but as the crowd began to surge forward, Sarah leaned in and whispered in my ear. Elias, look at the back of the room.
Standing by the exit were 2 uniformed officers from the State Bureau of Investigation. They weren't there for the meeting. They were there for Marcus. Chapter 10, The Foreclosure of Marcus Vane. 3 months is a long time in the world of legal fallout, but it passes in the blink of an eye when you're watching a predator become the prey. The fallout for Marcus Vane was a textbook example of systemic destruction. In the Western cold justice framework, we don't just win, we ensure the opponent can never play the game again. Narrative beat 1, the professional collapse. The morning after the special meeting, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission suspended Marcus's broker's license pending a full investigation. Without his license, his brokerage, the source of his legitimate income, evaporated. Clients fled and his partners sued him for loss of goodwill. But the real blow came from the district attorney. The forensic audit provided by Henderson was so airtight that Marcus was indicted on 12 counts of embezzlement. and 3 counts of tax fraud. Because he had used the Vainscaping LLC to launder the money, the IRS got involved. They don't have a neighborly setting. They simply seized his bank accounts and placed a federal tax lien on his property. Narrative beat 2, the slander of title victory. While the state was handling the criminal side, Sarah and I were finishing the civil side. We proved the lien Marcus filed against my house was willful and malicious. The judge awarded me $45,000 in damages and $30,000 in legal fees. Since Marcus's accounts were frozen, Sarah did something truly poetic. She used the judgment to file a judgment lien against Marcus's house. I was now a superior creditor. When the bank moved to foreclose on Marcus's home, my lien sat right at the front of the line. Narrative beat 3, the poetic justice. The final act took place on a cold Tuesday morning at the county courthouse steps. Marcus Vane's house, the one with the illegal pool, was up for auction. Marcus was there, looking 20 years older, wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit anymore. His wife had already filed for divorce, taking what was left of their unseized personal assets. I didn't bid on the house. I didn't want it. Instead, the interim HOA board bid on the property using the restitution funds we had recovered from Vane's brother-in-law. The HOA bought the house for the amount of the debt. The first thing the new board did was hire a demolition crew. They didn't tear down the house. They tore down the pool, the deck, and the fence. They restored the common area to its original state, replanting the native trees and turning Marcus's former backyard into a community nature trail. Marcus had to watch from the sidewalk as his monument to greed was turned into a public park for the neighbors he had spent years bullying. The resolution. I still live in Whispering Pines. The grass is still green and the mailboxes are still Tudor bronze. But the paper terror is gone. Our dues have dropped by 30%. The reserve fund is full. I recently received a letter from Marcus. He's serving a 5-year sentence in a minimum security facility. He asked for mercy regarding the remaining civil judgment I hold against him. I didn't write back. Instead, I forwarded the letter to the state parole board as evidence that he still refuses to accept responsibility for the financial damage he caused. Final hook. As I sit on my porch looking out at the restored wetlands where Marcus's pool used to be, I see old man Jenkins walking his dog. He waves. I wave back. I pull out my laptop and open a new spreadsheet. This one is titled Community Restoration 2025, because justice isn't just about destroying the bad, it's about making sure the good finally adds up. The Cold Justice Playbook, Dismantling Entitled Corruption. In the conflict between Elias Thorne and Marcus Vane, we see a masterclass in systemic warfare. Unlike standard revenge, stories that rely on emotional outbursts or lucky breaks, cold justice operates on the principle that the system is a machine, and if you know how to pull the levers, the machine will do the crushing for you. Section I, Summary of the Conflict. The saga began with a paper terror strike, a fraudulent lien for $12,000 intended to force Elias into a settlement or equity forfeiture. The antagonist, Marcus Vane, leveraged his position as HOA president to engage in a closed-loop embezzlement scheme. Elias successfully dismantled this empire by refusing to engage emotionally. Section II, Strategic Lessons and Methods. Lesson 1, The Gray Rock Mindset. The first lesson is emotional de-escalation. By remaining gray rock, emotionless, factual, and clinical, Elias forced Marcus to become the dynamic actor. Method, in any dispute, the person who displays the most emotion usually loses the moral high ground. Make the antagonist look like the aggressor, while you remain the reasonable party. Lesson 2, Identifying the Rotten Root. Elias didn't just fight the $12,000 fine. He looked for the motive behind the fine. If someone is committing a minor injustice, they are likely committing a major one. Lesson 3, The Bottom-Up Pivot. This is the essence of statutory levers. When the gatekeepers block you, go to the owners. Elias used NCGS Section 55A702 to bypass the board entirely. Lesson 4, Information Asymmetry and the Survey Trap. Never show your best evidence until the moment it can cause the most systemic damage. Elias used secret data to set a trap. Section III, the cold justice victory equation. Victory equals material violation plus binding evidence, multiplied by hubris divided by patience. Final takeaway, the system is the weapon. Elias didn't win because he was smarter. He won because he was more compliant with the rules than the person who wrote them. The law is a tool for those who know it, and a trap for those who ignore it.